Hey fam, today I would like to talk about pages. Pages are a optimization feature for MetaSounds that came out in 5.5 last year, and they're really instrumental in optimizing in cases, specifically cases where you may be operating on multiple platforms. So, for example, you may have some complex metasounds, some fancy metasounds, some flashy metasounds. I've seen some of the metasounds some of you folks create. They are magnificent, but also scary and really, really complicated. And so the idea behind pages is that you could have alternate data or alternate graphs for different platforms. And what's cool is it's completely invoked within the MetaSound editor and the MetaSound asset. So, in other words, you don't have to make changes to gameplay in order to invoke the page, alternate page. So, so I have an example here. It's not very complicated, but there is. It's not like the simplest, and so there's some room to demonstrate optimization. Um, uh, and so let's say you have your average platform. You got to think about the platforms in terms of your delivery, right? So you have your average platform, you have maybe your high end platform, but then you also might be shipping on a potato that's been wrapped in tinfoil and has been sold for like $300. So, in that case, you will likely need to optimize some of your assets, some of your content, some of your more complicated content. And so this is my sort of demo version. It's just a footstep system. And, it's the it's pretty basic. It's got a heel. It's got an array of heel samples, an array of toe samples that are randomly selected, and then they pass to a wave player, and the wave players play them. The wave player, the toe is staggered by a delay, and you have random pitch offset, and you have random volume, and these are parameterizable, so they can be changed in like a preset. And then you have this sort of low frequency noise generator that's just remodulating the volume throughout to create sort of like variation beyond sort of static parameters. And no, it's not a particularly complicated MetaSound, but I didn't want to spend too long on this video. I sigh heavily is because I've already spent too long on this video. But anyway, so here there's some dirt footsteps. Pretty simple, but you just get lots of variation, right? And obviously, some of you, you know who you are, will go ham on the variations, on like the number of samples. I kind of did it lightweight because I had to edit it right before this video, so I just did something really simple. Okay, cool. And then we have also created our presets. So here's the sort of dirt preset, which uses the same samples, but it is technically an override. And that will let me clear out these references. But I'm just using the dirt references right now for auditioning. And then we have a grass preset, right? And the grass preset is basically the same thing, except with grass samples. There you go. So okay, cool. And this is all working. Let's say you've been going through and everything's fine and hunky dory, and then someone's like, hey, you're spawning a bunch of footsteps, and this is actually starting to hit the old performance on our potato. So and this is, I think, there's going to be some meta sounds that are really complicated, and those are usually going to be your hero sounds or something like like a crazy music system or something like that, right? They're the kinds of things that you probably only instantiate once, one at a time. You know, they're very constrained in terms of the number of voices that they occupy. And so those, but then you're going to have those sounds. You know, it could be weapon sounds, could be footsteps, could be something else that you're going to be playing like a whole bunch of them at once. You know, like as an example, I think in the Matrix Awakens city sample, I did something. I have like something like up to 30 NPC vehicles could be audible at once. So yeah, you're going to have those kinds of sounds. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have more of a death by a thousand cuts situation um, where you're like sort of medium complexity meta sounds are starting to hit performance maybe because there's just so many of them playing, right? So in other words, in at scale, they start to sort of rear their heads, whereas one-offs, it's not that, it's like negligible or a sort of medium amount. And so those are all situations where you'll need to draw the line. You need to figure out what what is our sort of threshold for implementing an alternate uh, approach. And some of that, this is really going to be something that you will need to decide with your team. You'll need to decide. Probably there's going to be like a policy. If you've got like a lot of collaborators or contractors you're working with, you're going to want to probably determine like a very concise method for implementing alternate graphs, if that's the case. Or if it's more memory situation, then maybe it's just a policy around alternate like sample references or something like that, right? So let's go and add a target, a page target. So you'll need to go to your project settings, and you'll want to scroll down in the engine category all the way down to MetaSounds, and you'll see here as of 5.5 pages. It's still experimental, and so if you're, I would say, if you're um, shipping really soon, this I would probably only look at as maybe like an emergency feature. This is like a lever that you would probably only want to pull because you're like desperate. And there's probably some best practices you could implement to just sort of ease some of that strain on your MetaSound design. I've seen a lot of horrific MetaSounds. I've seen a lot of complicated, unnecessarily complicated MetaSounds. You like, in other words, I've seen MetaSound graphs where you could get a similar result with a much simpler graph. So some of that could be just down to the design and just being like utilizing best practices or better practices. But if you're, gearing up for, you've got like a longer term project, you might as well act, you could, yeah, they're experimental, but there's runway for you to respond to changes that come in. And the knocking on these sorts of features, this is not going to be experimental forever. It's going to be a full feature eventually. I don't know when. I haven't been paying that close attention. But there are already improvements to pages, between 5.5 and 5.6. Um, so it's a very serious feature. Let's take a look. Let's just sort of open this up. So first you'll see this target page name, right? This is the this drop down list will fill up when you add targets. But it's also, hold on a second. Let's see. Page name to target when attempting to execute MetaSound, right? So this is a way to sort of switch your auditioning process, right? So like when you're attempting to execute MetaSound, you're going to target this page first. But there's a whole fallback procedure. That's why there's a default that's always there. And so you'll see here we have the actual default settings, which include whether or not it's targetable. So when it's targetable, which is default true, page asset data can be targeted for the most applicable platform or platform group, right? So whatever the most applicable group is for this page, this is the default page, so it's the default. If associated asset data is defined, will always be cooked. If false, asset page data is only cooked if it is resolved from a higher indexed page setting and is not set to explicitly exclude from cook. So basically, these settings are going to be used in managing what data and assets get cooked out for your platform. So let's add a platform, and we will call this platform something funny because everything else is very serious about this feature. So I'm going to call it potato. You should not do this. You should call it something else. You should call it what it is, probably. You're just going to confuse people if you do this. But I don't want to name names. I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk about the brand of the potato. You know, I know we're all thinking Idaho. And yeah, and so we'll say this is a mobile, it fits in your pocket. It's a mobile platform. Anyway, so the idea here is that this is true, right, for mobile, and so when true for mobile, the page asset data can be targeted for the most applicable platform or platform group. That's mobile. That's what we selected here for. So for the potato page. If the associate asset data is defined, will always be cooked. If false, which we're not setting it false, the asset page data is only cooked if it is resolved from a higher index page setting. So there's basically what we're creating are indices, and the indices are going to create the fallback order. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, so here we're just going to sort of keep moving forward here. So there are a couple of very actually, so we'll go back to our editor, and you should see our new audition setting. So having added a mobile platform, we can now audition for mobile. We can audition just what's in the editor, and then we can audition the default. So this is this setting allows you to, we'll call it pin the audition sort of context. So regardless of what you're looking at, but there will also be we'll talk about how we can sort of look at the data. So like the first way we can help simplify, help optimize could be like maybe we have dozens of sample variations, right? Like maybe we have like 10 or 12 variations, and we like this graph, we think this is fine, but maybe we just want to simplify the number of samples that get shipped, right? So what we can do here is, let's make sure okay. So where are we? That's the quality setting. This is the there's another quality setting we'll look at in a second here. But let me go back to here. Oh yeah, so what we want to do is we want to add our potato data page. So here we're on the heel, and then we will also add a potato version of our toe variations. And so we can sort of audition that. We can sort of grab, we can just grab like the first heel, or sorry, this is our toe. Sorry, we'll grab our first and best toe value, and then we will switch over to heel and grab our first and best heel value. So in other words, let me smooth this up here a little bit. So in other words, what that means is that when we're listening to default, it's going to use samples from this page data. This is page data. And so we can see the little green speaker here, and then we can also see the graph page says default. Now, when we switch to mobile, now it's only going to use the potato data, heel and toe. So we'll basically just be, oh wait, whoops, what am I doing? Sync with page, let me turn this off, sorry. There we go. We were synced to the default graph, but let me switch over to potato here. So now we should be here, potato. So it's the same graph, but we're just hearing the same heel and toe samples over and over again. Now this is not bad, but what like I said before, maybe your implementation has like, a dozen heels and a dozen toes for like infinite variability. But we can like reduce the memory footprint on our potato by just saying, okay, we're just going to reuse these two samples over and over again and keep it simple. But maybe that's not enough. Maybe that doesn't work, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, first of all, I want to show you can do the same thing on the presets. So here's the heel. We can add, the same thing basically. So you have the same amount of control. In other words, you don't have to, sorry, where was I? Here it is. There we go. That's what I was looking for. You don't have to, if the only thing you're changing is the data, you're just adding paged values, then you don't have to worry about implementing them inside the parent graph. Oops, I keep doing that. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're just changing the data, you could just swap out the samples and just invoke that here in the presets. But let's say we're like this graph, even this graph is too much for our potato. Our potato is really bad. So we want to go dead simple on our graph here. Sorry, everyone. I experienced a crash. Okay, where was I? Right. So if there should be now a Pages tab next to your details. If you don't see it, you may need to like close and reopen your MetaSound. But yeah, so there's this Pages tab, and this will allow you to add an alternate graph to your MetaSound. So we're going to add one for our potato. So we have potato graph, and we can actually, let me save this and make sure we reset this sync with graph page. And then, yeah, so this visualization might be a little bit confusing, but you can always look for confirmation down here. So down on the lower left-hand corner, you see graph page, and it'll actually show you which graph page you're on. So let me click on potato. Now it looks the same, and that's because it's copied the graph over to your new graph. So in other words, let's say the first thing I want to do is get rid of this, that we don't need like a continuous modulator. Hold on, actually, let me do this. Sorry, just the LFO. We don't need this. We can just, pass this directly. Maybe that's enough. And we're just doing some simple, one and done volume modulation. And so our potato graph now, if we switch between, we go back to default. You can see our default has the, local frequency noise, and our potato doesn't. But let's say we want to even go further than that. Let's say, this whole heel toe thing is too much. So let's just get rid of one of them. And, instead we're going to author our own assets. And so let's just, assume that we're going to have a paged value that uses full footstep sounds. So we're going to have both an alternate graph and an alternate value. And we're going to keep it dead simple and just have 2 full footstep sounds. We'll just go like that. So this is the kind of decision process you may need to make for your project, where we won't need a trigger accumulator, and we could probably simplify this, and we'll just put this over here like this on finished, boom, and then we'll just do like a quick multiply by float for the volume mod. Keep it simple. And then and just like with in fact, we could probably get rid of this whole just the utilization of that parameter. We don't want to get rid of the variable. We don't want to change any of this stuff over here. But we can definitely simplify our implementation. So now we've got a single wave player, and it's just randomly selecting from 2 full dirt footstep sounds. Oh, sorry. Yeah, they're very similar sounding. So and then we may find the low frequency noise was creating a kind of average power effect on our sound. So we might want to add like a float scaler to like compensate for that. Where we go, okay, it was probably something like maybe 50% power, maybe something like 5% power compared. That's something you'll have to earball it on your end, but that's the kind of thing. And what's interesting to think about is that, okay, now we have a simpler graph. Our CPU cost has gone down. Obviously, this wasn't really complicated to begin with, so it hasn't gone down a whole lot. But we've reduced our relative render costs significantly, and our memory footprint is as minimal as we think we can get away with, and so we may want to think about paging some of these values. Maybe we want to go a little bit more extreme on the like default the default volume min and max. So we could say maybe add variation on both of these. So let's say the default min is going to be something more like 7.7, and the default max is going to be something more like well, maybe that doesn't change, but maybe we just keep it the same. But so now we have a little bit more, just slightly a bit more, diversity. Maybe we could even go a little bit more. Maybe I was a conservative here. we're trying to compensate for that LFO, their low frequency noise that we took away. Maybe I even bring this default down, a little bit like that. So these are all tweakables, but the idea is that you can go through your your values here and create alternate data for your various platforms, your various targets. And like I said, what you're probably going to want to develop is something more akin to a oops, hold on, not that low, more akin to a policy. Let's go a little bit, not that bad. So that's whatever whatever you think is best for your project, right? So like these potato platforms might be like maybe they don't even have good speakers, so it's like maybe you can't have headphones on them. I don't know, like so in other words, you may have a very clear and concise output hardware that you need to work with. And so you can make changes based on that information. And similarly, we can go to our presets, because this is just setting everything up. We just set the graph up as an example, and then we could go to our overrides. Now you notice that the non-overrided values data has the exact same thing as that. So it's worth going through the template, the MetaSound, to make sure you're getting what you want in terms of the data and the sort of default values. But then you can go to your here for we don't need a heel data at all for the potato, so we're overriding that. And then on our the toe, we don't need the toe because we're just using the heel on the potato. And then we just do our two best boy footsteps. And similarly for our grass preset, we're going to want to go through. We're going to add that heel override for the potato assets, and then we're going to want to get rid of, we just want to have that empty override, so there's no data on the toe array. And we can I believe we can just do this. Yeah, we can audition. I think this will work. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Sorry. No, I'm not. Oh, I think maybe like that. Can we do that? There we go. Now we're hearing our potato. And then, and so this is, then we can sort of just, yeah, you can see there's a lot more variation in our default, even though there's only 3 by 3. But it's not bad, right? I mean, it's not. So anyway, I just wanted to like make sure that was something that was communicated out, how to use pages, how to sort of start digging into optimizing your MetaSounds, thinking about optimizations. If you're taking this seriously, if you're working on an actual commercial project, and this sort of multi-platform. I mean, so many projects these days are multi-platform. So yeah, this is probably going to be a really important tool for you to leverage, and it's really important, I think, because it's so much part of the design process. Like your graph is very much a part of your design, and so it really it does require designers. This is the designer lever for optimization. So in other words, when you're going through optimization, there's going to be lots of folks who get involved, right? You're going to have your audio programmers, you're going to have your gameplay programmers, you're going to have, but you're also going to have your tech sound designers and or tech music designers and your sound designers and composers or music designers, as you may call them. And, every level, every individual can share the load of optimizing, right? So in this case, as an example, not only are we changing the technical design of the sound, we're also utilizing alternate content. So in other words, this requires, the sound designer, whoever's doing the sound design, to create an alternate, and also um, the technical designer, whoever's doing the technical design, to create an alternate. And like I said, there's going to be thresholds for everything. You're going to look at some graphs, you're going to be like, that's simple enough. Maybe the original graph that I had was fine, and you're just going to want to reduce the memory footprint for the lower end platforms. But you also might have some behemoth MetaSound graphs that you want to simplify, and a lot of those might be music graphs where you're doing some crazy stuff, procedural drums or something like that. And then maybe on like your potato, you can get away with just like a drum stem, as like a simplification. So what what decisions you decide to make are going to be very particular to your project, to the kinds of experiences you're trying to create, which you know what are your hero sounds, what are your spotlight sounds, and what are the sort of non-important or simple sounds. So yeah, anyway, so keep that all in mind. I hope this was educational. I hope this was useful. And yeah, keep at it. See y'all later. Thanks.